So you had an interesting path into directing. Can you talk a bit about your background?
Sure. I was a modern dancer and then I was a choreographer before I started directing, which doesn't seem like the most obvious path, but everybody I talk to who's a director or in film, nobody has the same path. There's no like one right way to do it. So I'm always fascinated by everybody's stories. But yeah, that was mine, and it was back a billion years ago when the American government actually sponsored the arts. Yes, I know most people are drooling or with walkers. But I was in London for like 2.5, 3 years, and then I was in Paris for about 3, and then I got a grant to teach, choreograph, and perform throughout the Far East, and I was based in Tokyo.
And then that led to you directing a short film. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, it was actually living in Japan. So I was there, actually teaching, choreographing, performing throughout the Far East, but based in Tokyo. And there was a day when I wanted a cup of coffee, and I had a choice between to go to the coffee shop on the right or one on the left, and I picked the one on the right, and I met this older Japanese man. He was in his 70s. I met him totally by chance, so if I had gone into the coffee shop on the left, I would have never met him. And he ended up becoming like my Japanese father, and his wife, and he adopted me, and he ended up telling me the most amazing stories that happened in his life. And what they had in common is that they all happened on Christmas Eve, even though he was Buddhist, all during different wars, because he was a foreign war correspondent and traveled all over the world. He spoke 12 languages as well.
Oh, wow.
And all about human connection. And so when he told me these stories, I knew I had to pass them on, and I knew it wasn't dance. It needed to actually be the stories.
And you received an Academy Award nomination for that.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
On my first film, I'm like, but it was a short, it was a short film, and I think it taught me everything I needed to learn. That there's so much more to come. But I actually did everything I was told not to do if I wanted a job in Hollywood when I made this film, because it was 3/4 in Japanese, so it had subtitles. It had flashbacks, narration. It was a period piece set in World War II, and it had one Caucasian character in it.
Oh, wow.
So it was not obviously a commercial project, but that was the story that I wanted to tell. So that's what I did, and I got the bug. When I directed, I'm like, oh wow, I think this might be the next chapter of my storytelling. So my short film, Tales of Meeting and Parting, gets nominated for an Academy Award. Huge fluke of nature. I was stunned when I got the call. So I didn't know anybody in the film business. I'm a dancer. So I'm getting all dressed up with my date at the time, and we're going in the first limo I've ever been in, and we get to the red carpet, and the limo pulls up, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And the door opens, and there are all the people waiting to see their favorite movie star, and literally there's like an echo. It's nobody. It's nobody. It's nobody. It's nobody. It's nobody. All the way down. I mean, literally, this is like a life lesson.
Yeah.
You can never take yourself too seriously, because all you hear is, it's nobody. It's nobody. It's nobody. And then, so I'm laughing so hard I can barely walk down the red carpet. So who comes behind me? Prince.
Oh, wow.
And the place goes insane. It's Prince in purple. I mean, it was one of those things where it was hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
You've worked on a variety of shows. I just want to read off some of them. Twin Peaks, West Wing, Gilmore Girls, NYPD Blue, ER, Mad Men, The Walking Dead, and Homeland. Can you talk about going back and forth from these different shows and directing all these different kinds of genres?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I've loved about working in TV, is that I've been able to work in a lot of different genres because I'm interested in all kinds of stories. And, obviously the Gilmore Girls and Freaks and Geeks couldn't be more different than The Walking Dead, but that's exciting to me. I'm always interested in different themes, and I keep coming back to those themes probably till I work them out. And I'm very interested in people being put in extraordinary circumstances where they're forced to deal with who they really are, and that could be a comedy or a drama. I'm interested in things not being what they appear to be, so I think I keep coming back to those themes. But like something like The Walking Dead for me, that's about thematically, who are we if everything in our lives change? I want to believe I'm going to save you if the zombies walk in the door, but I don't know that. Maybe I'll hide under the table. So I'm always interested in those kind of circumstances. But I'm also interested in coming of age stories and mothers and daughters and the political world we're living in, and working on Homeland has been incredible.
Right. Your first episode of Homeland was in the second season, the episode Q&A. A really pivotal episode. Can you talk a bit about coming onto the show and directing that episode?
Well, I obviously watched the show the first season, and they had asked me to direct, but I was unavailable. And I saw the first season, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. I mean, a psychological thriller where you can't figure out what is the truth. Right. It felt like the world was totally filled with anxiety and tension, and it was fascinating to me. And both of course, Claire Danes and Damian Lewis and Mandy, everyone, it's an extraordinary cast. So when they did come back to me second season, I was thrilled. And I happened to get the script, amazing script that Henry Brumell, the late and great Henry Brumell, wrote. And, it was a script that took place for 40 pages in one room. Of course, I was in that room with Carrie Matheson and Nicholas Brody with Claire and Damian, not a bad place to be. But that's a very challenging situation for a director, and I have to say I was quite terrified when I read the script. I'm like, oh my God, 40 pages in one room, what am I going to do? And Michael Cuesta, who directed the pilot of Homeland, brilliant director, and he was the producing director at the time, and he said something fantastic to me, which I remember always, which is don't be scared to be simple. And that was a great piece of advice. And filming that interrogation room scene, and I watched a bunch of other interrogation room scenes, which was helpful for me just to go, you know what? Don't be scared of two people sitting and talking, especially if they're saying amazing words and you have incredible actors. And finding the turning points for each of the characters in that scene was a huge challenge, because Nicholas Brody has been questioned, in cars, held captive for 8 years. He's been questioned over and over again. What is going to turn him? And for Carrie, what is her path that she sets out to turn him? So they both had two opposing things going on. So that was thrilling. It was thrilling. And Henry and I sat together watching the scene, and I felt him grab me at the beginning of the take, and we just stood there, hanging on to each other. It was really amazing.
Right. So you came back in season 3 as not only a director, but a co-executive producer, and in season 4 you're an executive producer. Can you talk about taking on that added responsibility?
Well, it's been amazing being full-time with the show. It's been extraordinary. And, being, when I can be in the writing room with the writers and seeing what the process is, it's an extraordinary group of writers. And Alex Ganza, has put together this, dream team of all showrunners. And so everyone's really encouraged to bring, their A game. And the best idea wins. It's an amazing creative environment. So being around for all of that process is fantastic. And also I love the amazing directors that come to direct Homeland. I mean, we have an extraordinarily talented group of directors coming in, and I get to be around for that. And I like being in a position to being sure that our directors coming in have everything they need to do the best possible job, and then seeing what they do with the material. It's very exciting. And being there to keep the train on the tracks and, the process going forward. It's been really rewarding. I end up directing 4 of the 12. So I do the first 2 hours and something in the middle and the finale. So it's been fantastic.
And is that intentional? You direct the first 2 episodes and then something in the middle and then at the end, just to sort of establish the tone of the season?
The thing that's been exciting also with Homeland is they keep changing that show every year. I mean, this year was a total reset of the show with Brody being gone, and what is the show going to be? And when I got when Alex Ganza sat down and pitched the season to me for season 4, and I got the outlines and the scripts, I was like, wow, okay, this is a whole new thing, and that's thrilling and terrifying and fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think every show sets that up the way they want to. Actually, for an executive producer, a producing director is a lot. I think a lot of shows do 2 or 3, but that's kind of how it's always been, you know, on Homeland. And again, Michael Cuesta did this for seasons 1 and 2, and then he had a movie he'd been working on for a long time, and it got greenlit. So that's the reason he left. And, you know, I would love him to come back and direct again if he ever had time. He's an amazing director, and he did the pilot.
Right. When you're looking for people to direct these episodes, you know, are you trying to play to their specific strengths, or, you know, what are you looking for?
Great storytellers.
Right.
Just great storytellers. And now with what's happened in television, I mean, there are so many wonderful directors working, and you know, we have great people coming in from, you know, Carl Franklin and Seth Mann and Alex Graves and Charlotte Sealing, and it's, you know, Clark Johnson, great directors.
And it's interesting how television has evolved so much in this sort of serialized drama format, where, you know, you have like a 12-hour movie with Homeland in each season. Can you talk a bit about that, telling these long-form stories?
Well, it just feels like, you know, there is so much interesting, complicated storytelling and interesting characters now in television, and that it needs to look like a movie. You know, there's a cinematic scope and visual storytelling, and I think assuming the audience is smart, you know, and I think that creates an incredible environment for all kinds of stories to be told. So yes, people can stick with something for a 12-hour movie and will, you know, and if those characters are compelling and the world is compelling, you know, then you get to be with that for 12 hours versus 2 hours. And, you know, I think there's some stories that need that kind of time to be told. And, you know, listen, I love going to movies. But I think with this era we're in now, it's only fed both mediums in a really positive way. You know, and now people are going back, directors and writers and actors are going back and forth between film and TV. And I think that's great for both mediums.
Yeah, and, you know, I was watching some of it before this interview, and I was very struck with this. You said it looks like a movie. I mean, the production value of your work. No, I was very impressed with some of the framings, and you know, I mean, the production value in one episode alone is remarkable. You know, can you talk about managing all these different elements? I mean, how long, you know, how long do you have to take to shoot one of these things?
Oh my God.
You know,
we need more time. Can you get us more time? No, we prep for 7 days and we shoot for 8 or 9 days, which is really, you know, I think about that and I'm like, oh my goodness. And this past season, we were shooting Cape Town, South Africa for Pakistan. Go figure.
Wow.
You know, and that was a huge challenge, but it's one that we kind of backed into and ended up being an amazing experience. But, you know, we were going to go to Israel and there were too many productions there, and we were going to go to Turkey, but they wanted script approval. So every place we tried to go, there was something that didn't make sense. And in Pakistan, they drive on the left-hand drive. Really? And that's a huge thing. And Homeland is very realistically real. So we can't all of a sudden have cars on the wrong side. And Cape Town has actually shot Pakistan before, so we were able to do it there. But, you know, we dressed 5 blocks of a city street, but if you looked over there, well, that's Africa. So it was definitely a challenge. And, you know, I think people think we have a huge budget on Homeland. We don't. So we have to be very clever with what we have. And we have, you know, great, Michael Click is an amazing producer, you know, he's the magic man, you know, and he's a line producer, but he's a creative producer, so he really gets it. So we're problem solvers, and we have great directors. You know, so, and it all comes from the material. If you don't have the writing, if you don't have the story, you know.
Right. I'll talk about Claire Danes' character, Carrie Matthews. She's such an interesting, complex character, who, it's brutal what she goes through each season, you know, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Can you talk a bit about that?
I mean, you know, having a female character at the heart of this that is so complicated and complex and brilliant and disconnected and, you know, it's, you know, with a bipolar disorder that sometimes is, you know, under control and sometimes isn't, you know, really interesting character to be dealing with. And she brings, you know, Claire is an amazing person and actress and completely fearless. I mean, she will go into whatever the situation requires. And she is nothing like Carrie Mathison, I should also add.
Right.
I mean, it is acting, you know. And she's a joy to collaborate with. She is an amazing partner in that way. But I think the fact that she is so complicated, you know, and real as a result of it, who doesn't always make the best choices. I mean, this season, you know, she was completely emotionally disconnected from herself. She had not at all dealt with that, you know, she was in some way responsible for Brody's death in many ways, you know, and yet she was very high functioning in terms of work, you know, dropping fire, you know, all over the place. So very functional in that strange way, but what does it take for her to go to bed at night? You know, she has to put in earplugs and a sleep mask and take medicine and wine and a mouth guard, and that's just to get to sleep. So her process of coming back to herself again in some emotional way was definitely a through line, you know, in the season.
And the relationship between her and Saul is just so interesting and complex. Can you talk a bit about that?
Well, I mean, Saul is such a primary relationship to Claire. It's her mentor, father figure, teacher. And I think there's a scene in episode 403, where, you know, he's out of the game, but he doesn't want to be out of the game. And so instead of just sending, you know, the, they called, I totally forgot. That they're not mercenaries. There's a special word for it. Okay, total brain drain. He brings them himself. Right. You know, his team, who are there to guard her, and the embassy. So, you know, he could have easily just sent them. But there's an amazing conversation in his hotel where he asks her if what she's doing, what he would do. And he realizes she can't really talk to him. And that's what's so sad about that relationship. Once you're out of the CIA, you're out of it. Like, you cannot, you know, you're sworn to secrecy. You can't talk about what you're doing, even with someone who was just there, who was a former director. So, you know, he is proud that she's done all the things that he would have done. So he's proud of his student, who has become now, you know, able to, you know, more than stand on her own 2 feet. And they can't really talk about it, you know. So there's the tragedy of that. And then of course, you know, I directed this episode where, you know, horrible, I had to shoot the Life of Pi kid, you know, in the head. You know, it's all in a day's work. But yeah, so, you know, so Carrie has set Ion up. And yet she's gotten this emotional connection with him, and he is indeed, you know, taking them to find Haqqani, you know, and then we find out that Saul is in the car, that he's been captured, and that moment where she says, you know, fire, you know, and Quinn stops her, you know, and on one level, as a mission, she was right. And in fact, Saul said, why didn't you just kill me? I don't want to be held ransom. It's the worst nightmare for a CIA agent, to be held and be used as a pawn. But of course, Quinn knew that if she killed Saul, she would be lost as a human being. So, you know, the frustration of being that close to Haqqani, you don't get a target like that often, is hugely emotional. So the ride that Carrie and Saul take this season, you know, and then Seif Mann directed an amazing episode where they're out on the tarmac for the prisoner exchange, and Saul won't go, and she comes out to meet him. I mean, to me, she cannot let that man die. You know, that man is too important to her. And then, of course, where we end, you know,
Right,
and, you know, that ultimate betrayal
yeah.
at the end of, you know, seeing Dara Dahl in that car, and the ends justify the means, and the sense of disillusionment, you know, with what's it all about, you know, at the end of the day. So,
Right.
I mean, it's a huge trajectory, and more to come.
Right.
More to come.
And I think that's one of the interesting things about the show, you know. What cost does our national security come at? You know, can you talk a bit about that?
Well, I think, you know, one of the things that's been so interesting in terms of process is that every season, the writers, and Claire and Mandy and myself, go and meet, not at the CIA, but and we go to this building in Georgetown where we talk with people in all levels of the intelligence community, from different subjects: cyber terrorism, narco terrorism, station chiefs, people from the DNI, so all across the board, to kind of get the temperature of what's going on in the world, and in fact what their fears, biggest fears and nightmares are, you know, in terms of what's happening now in the world. And that, you know, for the writers, for Alex Gansa and the whole writing team, that has a huge amount to do with where the season goes. And that's very exciting. I mean, it's a story. It's not, we're not telling a true story, but it is certainly based on real events. And I think one of the things that, or at least the climate of real events, let me put it that way. I think one of the things that's interesting is that we always try to show a human side to, whether it's a Haqqani or a Javadi, you know, they have their point of view. They believe they're doing the right thing. So you want to see both sides, as do we. And we don't always do the right thing. Right. You know, we in the moment, you think you are. You know, there's a bigger goal at the end of it, but it isn't always the right path. So, you know, to me, that's thrilling to deal with that kind of material.
Now, you won your second DGA award. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You were one of 4 women that won that night. I was at the DGA Awards in the press room, and you came back and you said something really cool, which I'm going to paraphrase, so if I get it wrong, forgive me. But it was something to the extent of, I think it's been proven tonight that when women get up to bat, they do a really good job. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, you know, I've been involved with the Directors Guild for a long time now, because I come from my father was a labor organizer, so, you know, I feel really strongly with giving back to this amazing organization, you know, that protects not only our creative rights, but our health and, you know, all of that. So, and it's given me a great community of directors as well, you know. So I think the fact that statistically, it's still really bad for women. I mean, when I started directing, like, 20 years ago, you know, if you had said to me then that we would still be talking about statistics for women directors, I would have said that's impossible. This will be a non-issue. That's ludicrous. But sadly, it's the same as when I started directing. And you would think in entertainment, in film and TV, we would be at the cutting edge of this. This would be a non-issue, it would be an equal playing field. So to me, the fact that it isn't is really, you know, terrible and shocking. And you know, there are definitely shows that have never hired women. Or you hear, oh, well, we hired a woman once and it never worked. It didn't work. So we're not going to hire another one. Well, that's crazy thinking. You know, you would never say that about a man. Right. You know, so, you know, I think that it's an important issue to discuss as a result. And the fact that 4 women won in major categories, I think is very thrilling. And, you know, somehow, I don't know why there would be any fear about women directing, but I think what a great thing to put out there that, yeah, you know, this shouldn't be something that people are scared of. So if it didn't work with one woman, you wouldn't not hire, if it didn't work with a man, you wouldn't stop hiring men to direct, you know. So yeah, I think it's really time for things to change in a big way.
What advice would you give to anyone who's trying to come into this business now as a director?
Well, again, I don't think it's easy for men to direct. I should also say I don't think it's easy to be a director. Right. You know, I think there are, you know, all sorts of things you hurdles to climb. But I think you have to be incredibly tenacious, as you well know. I mean, you have to be tenacious. I think you have to have a lot of passion to be a storyteller. I think no matter what anyone says about how you can't do it or statistics or whatever, you just have to keep going. I think you need, obviously, some kind of talent, and I think you need a little bit of luck. Somewhere there has to be that window of opportunity. I mean, I was given a helping hand. I try to do that to others. I think it's really important to pay it forward in that way. And I think you have to, now we're in an era where you can actually pick up a camera and tell your story. You don't need to have permission in the same way, and I think that's exciting. And I see that happening everywhere. I see what's happened with an assistant of mine, Leisha Clouston, who she went to AFI and she did a short film, but things weren't coming together, and she started a web series, and she made an episode a month that cost $100, and it got a big following, and she's just finishing her 3rd movie. Wow. That's a success story. That's amazing, and it's because she just picked up a camera and did it. So that's the good news, is that if you want to tell a story, you can. But the system, navigating the system is it's not easy, but it's possible.
Right. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It was fun talking to you, Zach.
Oh, thank you.